This is part 7 of the Tamiya Avante 2011 build series. So all of the electronics are installed. Everything about the chassis is complete with the exception of the body. I'm still painting that. I'll have that done soon. But I just wanted to go over the electronics here and a couple of little things that I did as well since the last time. So when I was building the shocks, I had talked about using the one-hole pistons, both front and rear. Having everything installed on the chassis and then just dropping it from about 6 inches or so just to see how that actually works. It works pretty well for the rear. The rear stays planted, but the front, it gets a little bouncy. So what I did was I took these off, took the oil out, and replaced the one-hole piston with a two-hole piston in the front only. That works a little better. You could also just use a lighter damping oil. The damping oil supply with this chassis is the medium damping oil. I have plenty of team associated damping oil that I could use, but I just wanted to see if I could make this work well with the kit supplied damping oil and shock pistons. So I think that the two-hole pistons are a good compromise in the front, because if you use a one-hole piston, it's underdamped, and a three-hole piston is overdamped. So that's for the shocks. And I use in the rear, again, just 2 shock collars here. That seems to finish off the rear. One thing I noticed after installing the motor, and I just blipped the throttle a little bit, these little nuts that tighten up against the ball ends, or the ball joints, they come loose and they just kind of roll around on these screws here. So what I did was, after first making sure that the camber was set correctly front and rear, and the way I did that on this guy, I just undo this nut, you pull this out, you twist this in or out, and then you put it back in with the screw in here, so you could just quickly take it out and put it back in and adjust it how you want. Set the camber in the front. In the rear, you just it's easiest to take out not this screw but this screw here, because that screws into the metal post in the back here. Just take that out, screw this in or out, screw it back in. It's a little more tedious than, you know, a modern chassis, but it's not too bad. Just the camber front and rear, and then I just use a little bit of blue thread lock on these nuts. So I'd say take this guy, unscrew it all the way back, put a little blue thread lock on the screw here, and then screw this in, and just do that for each of the 2 nuts on each of the 4 camber links, front and rear. Okay, so that locks them in place. That also allows you to, especially for the rear, make sure that this little holder piece here for the rear stabilizer is actually vertical, because you're supposed to mount this vertically. So now that you have thread lock in here, this isn't going to get loose, so you can just make sure this is nice and tight, you know, so that this mounting piece stays in place vertically. Be sure to use blue thread lock and not red thread lock, because at least with blue thread lock you can take it out, or you can undo it if you want. Just apply a little bit of heat to it. Actually, funny that this should happen. One thing that I've noticed just in building this chassis is this rear stabilizer tends to move around a bit laterally. So you can see this little crease here. The whole stabilizer just kind of shifted out this way, just randomly. So it doesn't seem to affect how it behaves, but sometimes you just gotta see. There we go. Just pull it back in. There's a little bit of play there, so it may move around, just so you know. Okay, now to the, actually, before we get to the electronics, let's get to the battery. So just to test this out, I'm using a Turnigy Nanotech 4200 milliamp hour LiPo pack. It's a stick pack, okay? And with the battery mount piece that you install very early on in the build, I installed that way in the front mounting position. The battery fits in pretty well, actually. I mean, it's fairly snug. It's not, I mean, it's not hard to get it in there. It's pretty easy to mount it. And then you have just this little plastic piece here, this guy here, and it mounts up through these holes, and then you just put this body clip in here. This is a bit of a pain, because the alignment of the hole is a little far down. So when you actually push this plastic piece up, only like a part of the hole actually sticks through the top, so you really got to press on this body clip to close it off. You could just take a razor blade or a reamer or something and just try to open up that hole to make it easier to put this body clip through. Okay, so as for the electronics, I talked about the servo before. I believe this is the 625 MG high-tech servo. So it's a metal gear servo. Works fine. I have a Kimbrough servo saver, just a standard servo saver, but what I did, you may be able to see here, if I get the light in there, this bit here I just chopped off at an angle because when the car steers to the right, there's not a whole lot of space in the upper deck to fit this whole servo saver moving over. So it'll run up against this crease here in the upper deck. So you just chop off that little portion there at an angle, and then you can steer all the way out to full lock in that direction, and it won't be a problem. Or you can use a different type of servo saver in the Black Special chassis. I didn't even use a servo saver. I just used a stock high-tech blue servo horn, the aluminum horn that comes with it. Then that means you don't have any servo saver action in there, so you do that at a risk. But this seems to work okay. The electronics, I have Spectrum SR300 receiver, standard issue, Turnigy Trackstar 100 amp speed control. Very similar, actually exactly the same as what I have in my TA02. If you can go watch that video, I converted that chassis to a Top Force. Same speed control in there, it works pretty nicely. This is a Turnigy Trackstar 7.5 turn motor, and if you look at the specifications, it appears to be a knockoff of the Reedy Sonic. So the Reedy Sonic 7.5 turn is a 410 watt motor, around 2200 to 2300 kV. The Trackstar 7.5 is 410 watt motors. Oh, sorry, 7.5 is around 5200 or so kV, 5200 kV, 5100. The 17.5 is 22 to 2300 kV. That's same kV rating as the Reedy Sonic 17.5 and 190 watts. Same power rating as the Reedy Sonic 17.5. So even if you look at the motor can design, the way these openings are cut, this is very, very similar to a Reedy Sonic, which I also have right here. It's basically the same exact motor, except this will cost you about $90. This will cost you about $30. So we'll see, you know, if the bearings last and all that stuff, but I would suspect they're effectively the same motor. If you want to save some money and get a decent motor, this is pretty good. Now, in terms of mounting this motor onto the motor mount, it was a little tricky because you can see, maybe it's a little hard to see there. I'll just show you on this motor because it's the same thing. There's this kind of plate here, okay, that you can see through the openings, and it sort of, it's a bit wavy. So what happens is, in one of the screw holes that you'll screw this in, this plate will come up, and then in the alternating screw hole, it'll come back down. So that means that the screw you put into this hole has to be shorter than the screw you would put into this hole. Now, the way the motor mount works on the Avante is that you're mounting on the opposing holes on the motor. So one hole would have to have a tall screw and one hole would have to have a short screw. Or you can use both short screws, but certainly one hole would have to have a shorter screw than what is supplied in any part of this RC Screws kit. So what I instead did is I took two washers and I just put them between the motor and the motor mount so I could use a slightly taller screw on both the top and bottom, or left and right screw holes. Now this does create a little gap. Hopefully that won't be so bad in terms of like the motor flexing or moving around. It seems to sit there okay if you screw these screws in tight enough on the motor mount. There is enough space between the motor and the chassis to fit that, so that's okay. The sensor cable, what I did there is it comes out from about the center of the motor there. I had to move the servo over a bit before mounting the motor and fitting the sensor cable in there, and then the sensor cable, I run it around and up through this side of the motor. And to prevent the sensor cable from hitting the center drive shaft, I just took a piece of Lexan here and just taped it over the chassis to protect the drive shaft from the cable and vice versa. And then that just runs over and plugs into the sensor port right there on the speed control. So, and of course I cut the wires here to make sure, I don't have too much wire muck going around here. Like if you look at the Black Special videos, I had a lot of cables in there, and that was kind of limiting how well I could actually mount the body. So this should allow the body to mount reasonably well. So that's pretty much it for now in terms of, how it looks fully built. I would say that I probably did a better job building this than I did with the Black Special, just because of little things like how I did the shocks and the thread lock I put here on the nuts and everything. But it's not bad. So I'll just show you here with the 2-hole pistons in the back and the 1-hole pistons in the front. If I just drop it like this, it's completely planted. All right, it doesn't bottom out. It's just nice and soft. You can see the front sort of skips a little bit. It was worse with the 1-hole piston, but if you land it at either level or a slight forward angle, it's fine. So basically, if you're going to take this racing, then you would want to pitch the car forward just a tad as you're coming off of a jump, just to make sure it lands right. But that suspension works a heck of a lot better than the Black Special. So let me get the Black Special out. I'll show you this. If I drop this from about the same height, you can hear that bottoming out. Ow, that hurts. So, and this has the 3-hole pistons front and rear with the same oil, okay? So, it's certainly very springy, but it's underdamped. This has, I think, just the right amount of damping, just by changing the number of holes in the pistons, okay? So, that's it for now. When I have the body painted and mounted and everything, then I'll make the final video.